Jack, welcome to the show. I'm very excited to have you on. In your book, Mountains Within, you wrote a lot about something you called achievement addiction.
hmm
And I wanted to ask you, is it possible to go after our most ambitious achievements without letting it hollow out the rest of our life?
Well, I think it is possible. I think you have to be able to answer the question, and this is at any stage in life, Elon. I think you have to answer the question, what matters most? There's nothing wrong with seeking accolades. There's nothing wrong with seeking achievement. But for me, it was achievement at almost all cost. I was more in love with my career, but you got to understand it was a wound from my father that I wanted to please him. I wanted to receive his love. And I learned early on that it seemed in my young brain, it seemed that I would be loved by him if I could just become hugely successful. And that obviously didn't turn out because yes, I've had this hugely successful career, but at what cost? So I believe you can be an achiever, but you should always measure yourself by answering the question, what matters most to me right now? I
I
mean, I
love
have a
that.
question. I have a statement in my book that says I wouldn't have married me.
So when you say you want to answer the question of what matters to you most now, what is the threshold between measuring what matters
Yeah,
most right now compared to like looking at the future and being like, I want to be prepared?
correct. So I think that's a great question, and the operational word is now, because at this stage in your life, you're 21. You know, the danger that you would run into, and most young adults would run into, is they get the question, they've got it there. What matters most to me, and then they struggle because it's almost like that doesn't seem good enough. And they don't go there because they're measuring themselves on some idealistic thing that, gosh, it's got to be stronger than that. No, it doesn't. I mean, for example, at 21, you might say, "My what matters most to me is getting a lot of experience in internships and trying to land a job that gives me great experience." Done. Nothing wrong with that. See, there's no judgment in the what matters most question. Then, I mean, I'll just put what ifs in front of you. So later in life, let's say, what if you got in a relationship and you got married? You would want to recalibrate what matters most right now because you just committed your life to another person. See, I never did that. See, I say it in my book that I wouldn't have married me at the time because I was measuring my life by my career, even though I felt like I was in love. And I truly did feel like I was in love, but my behaviors didn't match my action, my statements. And then let's say you had children. Now it's going to change again. See, what matters most changes again. Later in life, you have grandchildren. What matters most changes again. I'm just giving you examples. You get a different kind of a job. What matters most might change. What if you own your own business one day? And you bet the farm. You mortgage your house and you do everything to grow your business. Now what matters most changes. And if you're married and you have children, you want to bring them into the decisions you're making. See, I never did those things. I was so hung up on my career to get the love from my dad that I never asked myself that. And now I look back, and had I asked myself that, it would have been much, much different.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing you're talking about, Jack, because for me, something that I've noticed is a lot of people, it seems like, won't believe a lesson unless it's learned themselves. So, one thing I think about, agree or disagree with me if I'm wrong, but a lot of people will say, money buys happiness. And I've talked to a lot of people that would disagree with that statement, CEOs, people that have had an abundance of money. But it's always interesting to me that it's like, okay, do they say this thing? Do they say money doesn't matter because they've already have the prerequisite of having money, right? So
hmm
my question to you, Jack, would be as somebody who has the wide scoped view, you've had this experience and now you're telling people, you're warning them against the idea of being addicted to achievement, right?
hmm
Do you think that this idea is something that can be learned by people before it's too late for them?
Yes, I do think you can learn it. Let's understand this can't buy happiness kind of a thing. Some of the most joyful people I've ever met in my life are extremely poor. It's not about the money or lack of money. It's about their state of circumstances that they live in that gives them joy. Some people don't want the rat race that's out there. They want to live a calm life. I have good friends that don't have cable television, and they're happy as a lark. Others of us would die without it. You see what I'm getting at? So it's what really, again, coming back to our question, what matters most? If you're if you want to live an extravagant lifestyle, the question to ask is, will that improve my joy? See, I'm not sure that's the metric. What will give you joy? It's not, I don't think it is about something external like money. It's what you want to do with your life and what gives you peace and joy. But again, coming back, some of the most joyful people I've ever met don't have money.
Yeah, I was talking about it with one of my friends, ironically, and we kind of were agreeing on this topic. It was super interesting. The idea that everyone is doing things their own way, but no one's doing it wrong. Like everybody's got their own thing. For me, I might have this podcast and it's like something I like to do, but then somebody has no interest in the podcast, right? So it's like everyone's got their own thing. I think that's actually one of the beauties of life is how different everybody is, but how similar at the same time. Something you said kind of brings me to something that you talked about. So you had an episode where you talked about the mainstream and how they talk about popular success advice. You mentioned things along the lines of like fake it till you make it or get 1% better every day. And from my understanding, you guys were arguing against it and kind of just talking about these topics. What do you think are some of the things that the mainstream success advice tells you and kind of tries to get in our heads, but you completely disagree with?
Well, mainstream idealism would tell you that you need to be driven. And I think your generation is kind of pushing back on this. I mean, the generation ahead of you pushed back big time. Your parents were the first generation that pushed back on my generation and Gen X and said, "No, we're not gonna be the two parent where everybody's working and getting the nice home." You got to understand that this became a generational thing that and then uh, I mean, the dot-com era of the late 90s, but then it was in the early 2000s. I mean, the mortgage bang that hit hard, where young people were overexposing themselves by buying very, very significant homes with 0% down, mortgaging, $500,000 mortgages, but not making that much money. And then they lose their jobs or they don't have a backup because they've been trying to keep up with the rat race. So I think we have to really step back. And again, I know I sound redundant, but this what matters most question is so key because it's not what society wants you to do. It's what you want to do. What gives you joy? Society will lie. Society will create this big bogus. Trust me, I fell into it. I fell into it. You see these athletes making incredible money. You see, movie stars making incredible money, wealthy, and then you're going, "Wow, that's the life." No, it's not. They have the same problems. They just arrive in style. I mean, it's just honestly, they have the very same problems you and I have. They do arrive in style. They've got limos and drivers and cooks, and maybe they've even got private jets and pilots, but they've still got the same problems that we have. And sometimes they struggle with those problems more than we do. The idea that we have to meet someone else's norm, I believe, is changing, but if it has to change because we set our own expectations. That's part of who we are, and that's the realistic approach to life. Who are you at your core? Who do you want to be at your core? And now what are you going to do to live your life that way?
So, with your question of what matters most, coach so many different people, so many different teams. You've been an athlete yourself. When you ask the questions to your athletes, let's say you say, what matters most? Do you think that there's a certain statement that gets the most people success within their sport?
Not necessarily. See, I think the way you do it, and again, this is really key. And when I've worked with athletes and asked this question, the answers, by the way, range all over the place. Um, and there's no judgment. Again, I keep coming back to that. Whatever your answer is to what matters most, there's no judgment. Like,
I
if
like
you
that.
want to make money and be rich, that's great. Just understand that that's going to put some limitations maybe on other parts of your life that you might enjoy because you're going to be that driven. Um, so is it fair to marry someone, for example, like I did? I mean, is that really fair to another person that you're so sold out on your career and making money that, yeah, I want to get married? Well, if they buy into it and they agree with you and they're on the journey with you, okay, that's good. Do you see what I'm getting at? But if
Yeah.
you do it like I did and just keep doing the career, that's not fair. So I think again, the what matters most question is you and why would somebody marry you? You know, as I said in the book, I said I wouldn't have married me back in that day, you know. Uh, but why would someone marry you? Why would someone be compatible? Why would someone want to be your best friend if you can't give them energy?
Wow, that's sitting with me, Jack.
Well, I hope so. I hope it sits with your listeners too, because
So
it
you
needs
mentioned,
to. This is why I wrote my book, Mountains
yeah,
Within,
yeah.
because again, this hugely successful life in many different kinds of careers, but at what cost? The at what cost?
If you could go back and change things, what would it be?
Being willing to say no in situations. I didn't have to say yes to everything. I said yes to everything. Everything. I mean, and I had to do a lot of stuff for free because I was one of the first sports scientists, commercial sports scientists in the world. You know, I was the founding chairman of the sports science committee for the US Tennis Association. And tennis took me all over the world. I said yes to everything. Did I have to? No. You know, could I have said no? Could I have? Yes, I could have said no, but I didn't. So it's a matter of, do I really need to get on this plane and go do this trip? And especially if I'm in a relationship, or especially if, you know, now if you're not in a relationship and it's all, again, there's no judgment. See, but I was trying to have all the cake and eat it too. And that's not a good thing. Because you could even argue that I wasn't the best for my career that I was trying to grow as well.
Sure. Do you think that when if you were to ask yourself the question of what matters most to you at the time, you would have said it would have been, your career, again, you said you were getting paid for free, you were doing all these things, but given the fact that you were trying to like if the answer to your question was that the thing that mattered most was your career, then I feel like wouldn't it make sense that you saying yes to everything would help build up your career?
Well, yeah, for sure. Saying yes to everything, singularly minded on my career, yes, that built my career.
Yeah. But then
But the
hurt you in
fact
other
then that I
ways.
wanted to get married, that
Yeah.
probably pulled away from my career. See, because then now there's conflict all the time.
Yeah.
If it was just me doing what I do, no conflict, let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's get on that plane. Let's go. Let's enjoy the world. But if I choose to have my cake and eat it too, now you got to figure out, okay, who's getting what? And I wasn't very good at that.
People talk even outside of sports a lot about balance. Right? I don't know your opinion on it, but when it comes to your life on a macro scale, right? I'm trying to think about it. I think that it's possible to say that your life is unbalanced in the now because you're thinking about what matters most, but in the long term, your life becomes balanced because you realize that in the long term, what matters most to you always changes. What do you think about that?
Well, I think this is why it's good to calibrate this at your stage in life, for example, at 21. And I think you just regularly ask yourself, what matters most to me today? What matters most today? You know, maybe I've made a decision to go on a vacation with some friends. Okay. Am I going to work while I'm on vacation? Am I going to, or am I going to take a break from work? And then you make that decision because what matters most on this trip? What matters most might be connecting with my friends, or the person I'm in love with. Maybe that's what matters most. But if you're trying to, you know, now again, if they understand truly, see, I think one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves is, oh, they understand. No, they don't. No, they don't. Unless they are on the journey with you. See, I was so blinded by this. My first wife, I took her on every trip. I took her to Wimbledon. I took her to Australia. I took her all over the world with me, to Hong Kong. No, Singapore, not Hong Kong. We went to Australia, Singapore, back to the Australian Open, you know, tennis tournament. I took her all over the world with me. So I'm thinking everything's fine. And I get blindsided 3 years after our marriage, but she's leaving me. And I look back on it now, I don't blame her. And she and I have reconciled. We're friends. And we both, we wish we would have gone to counseling, but we didn't. But I was blindsided. I thought everything was fine. But you see, I didn't know how to ask the question, what matters most?
Yeah.
See, I just thought, just go, go, go. And this is what I do. And I also erroneously said, you knew what you were getting into when you married me. That's bad. That's a bad statement. And I
Yeah.
own that. And I talk about that in the book.
What did, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro teach you, about, I guess, yourself, especially when your son was younger and you were older? You had 2, you were saying not real knees and you did it, but you had an epitome. What was that epitome?
Yeah, so I have artificial knees. They're metal and obviously titanium. And my son was only 12 years old, and it's right behind me. There he and I at the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro, 19,341 feet. You know, and on the mount, first of all, let's have a little fun with this. When we got on the mountain, he was the youngest on the mountain, and I was the oldest.
Interesting.
Um,
That's awesome.
and they affectionately called me, the guides and the porters called me Babu, which in Swahili means grandpa. And I'm going, you got to be blanking kidding me. I've trained my butt off for this, and you're calling me, and this is my son, and you're calling me grandpa. But they were very respectful. They would go around me the first couple of days, pole pole babu, which means go slowly, grandpa, and go slowly isn't because of my age. They tell everybody to go slowly to acclimatize because you're good to be at extreme altitude and you're only going to be doing it in a few days. Like, see, the summit of Kilimanjaro is higher than base camp Everest. So you and a base camp Everest, if you're going to try to climb Everest, they take 2 weeks to get there. See, we're going to try to summit Kilimanjaro in 6 days. So here I am in my mid 60s, pole babu. And then on the day 3, they find out that I have metal knees. And the head guide comes up. It's really quite funny. The head guy comes up to me and says, "Is it true what they say about your knees?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, that they're metal. And I said, "Yeah, I have artificial knees. They're metal." He says, "Okay, we changed your nickname." I said, "Okay." He says, "Now we call you Chuma Matu." And I said, "And that means?" He goes, "Iron Man." And I went, boom. I'm good with Iron Man. So that I should write an article one day, how to go from grandpa to Iron Man in 3 days. But anyway, and so on the mountain, it's hard. I mean, there's this scree that's like gravel that's loose and you slide, and my artificial knees, there's shale plates that shift when you put your foot on it. I mean, I'm constantly going, God, am I going to throw my back out? I mean, because you're doing lifts all the time. There's there's sometimes there's 150-foot drops and you're swinging around a rock, and it's just crazy. And I realized on the mountain on the third day that everything I was feeling on Kilimanjaro, the exhilaration, yet the anxiety, the euphoria, yet the terror sometimes of looking straight down. It was just like my life. It was just as chaotic as my life had been. And that was when I decided that if I wrote Mountains Within, see, because everybody had been telling me, Elon, for many years, because I've had such a crazy career, you got to write your memoir. You got to tell your story of how you got started in sports science and how you became a professional speaker, how you started your business and sold it. And but you see, they only saw the cool stuff. They didn't see all the crap that was the conflict. My dad, the marriages. And it was on Kilimanjaro that I said, if I write this book, it has to be the whole story. That's the only way I'll help people. The cool stuff would be entertaining, but I didn't want to write an entertaining book. I wanted to write a book that has reach and can help people. And that's why I wrote the book. So the epitome hit the true moment hit me on about the third day when the mountain was exactly like my life. And that was pretty cool, I thought.
So, question for you, it's a little bit metaphorical, but you got to the tip of the mountain. I know it's a huge achievement. First of all, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I think for a lot of athletes, and I'll say people in general, but I think it's easier, it's related with athletes, but they go from the peak of the mountain to the peak of the mountain, right? Like they get to the very top of whatever they're doing in metaphorically of what their sport is. They win a tournament, they get number one in something. So then the problem, and I know this happens a lot in Olympians where they win a gold medal and they get extremely depressed after. So for you as somebody who coaches these people, how can athletes, how can business people learn to go after what they want, what matters most to them, but at the same time, once you get there, know where to navigate from there.
Yeah. I think it's a really a quite simple premise. Your life isn't based, although these could be life-changing moments. Let's really understand that. I mean, I've had the great fortune to work and advise, Masters champions, Grand Slam winners in tennis, Super Bowl champions. I mean, you got to understand the world continues as it had been before and after that achievement, that accolade. So you have to understand, but your life can change. If you win a tournament like those or an event like those, yeah, endorsements, money, speaking engagements, I mean, everything can change. So yes, your life can change financially, for example, but it doesn't have to all change. See, because and that's why depression can sometimes sit in because you literally go, "Well, is that all there is?" Like, yeah, I'm making more money. And yeah, I made it to the summit of Kilimanjaro. And it was funny when we made it to the summit, I wasn't jumping up and down. It was like, gosh, we did it. It was like, really, it was like we did it. But I was at a different place when I got there, as opposed to, you know, being inducted into a tennis coaching hall of fame or, being on the stage following Christopher Reeve and preceding Margaret Thatcher. You know, it, yeah, I was really excited about doing that. And I was really grateful to be on Kilimanjaro with my son, 12-year-old son. And the fact that he struggled and made it, the battle within himself, I saw the battle within himself to get there. It's those kinds of things that how you want to ask, how is my life better now? Or what matters most right now? Again, you come back to that. Yeah, you just won the Super Bowl. Okay. How is it different than if you hadn't won the Super Bowl? You might be richer. Is anything else different? Often not. Often not. Or the Olympic gold medal. Often not. But what matters most, if you keep calibrating yourself, I think you stay grounded and you don't get hung up on all the accolades. I wish
Yeah,
I had done that.
yeah. So then when we're asking the question of what matters most, how much of a timeline are we talking about? I know you're saying across your life, you don't ask what matters most, but does it mean like every day waking up, asking what matters, every weekend recalibrating, or like if I'm going to a coffee shop with my friend, I ask myself, okay, I'm getting coffee. What matters to me at the time? Oh, having a good conversation.
I think that's fair to just it's constantly front of mind. I think that's fair. I think the other thing that we haven't talked about that I would love to, because I do mention this in the book, is having mentors. And I mean, now at this stage in my life, I serve as a mentor to many people, many younger people. Um, and I love that role. But I could have never gotten where I was without mentors in my life. And you need advisors. I don't care who you are. I don't care how successful you are. You need people feeding into your heart and soul who give you truth, not just yes people, not yes people. You need truth fed into your soul about what matters most right now and who are we, who are you, and so on.
Jack, how do people find mentors?
Well, I think you get to meet them through your networking and then you ask someone, would you mentor me? Now, some people may not know what to do. That could be as simple as, can we just have coffee and just I'd like to know your perspective of life.
Ooh,
It could be as simple as that. It doesn't have to be a big shiny deal, if you know what I'm saying.
yeah. That's something that's always been interesting to me because when people think about mentorship, they think about this like exactly what you're talking about, this long 8-week course where we meet 2 times a week and it's so professional. But
No, no,
I
no,
love this
no.
idea. I love this idea of like, yeah, just like getting one time coffee, one time
Yeah,
perspective.
yeah. It's so important. I mean, the main mentors in my life, I mean, I mentioned them all in my book because Chuck Dillman. Dr. Charles Dillman was my kinesiology professor. And see, my undergraduate degree isn't even in the field I'm in, Elon. My undergraduate degree was in wildlife biology because my father made me study agriculture because he had to pay for my education. And he thought I was absolutely insane thinking that I was going to play tennis in the Big Ten. So I had to study agriculture. So I got my degree in wildlife. I hated it. So I won't go through the story now, but I got into kinesiology thanks to my sister advising me. She was probably the primary mentor as a young adult. My sister, she's older. But then I met Dr. Charles Dillman, and he said 17 words to me at the end of my first semester. He said, if you apply yourself, you could become a pioneering leader in the science of tennis performance. And there was no career. There was nothing like that. I just said, I'm going to do this. So then he taught me how to do quality research. Then I go to Florida State for my PhD. My dissertation advisor is Dr. Robert Singer, who was the president of the International Society of Sports Psychology. So now I've had great researchers, great leaders feeding into my heart and soul about my career. But understand, the mentors yet weren't personal. They weren't, nobody feeding into me personally. That happened later in my life. I had a senior pastor at my church who took me under his wing and mentored me spiritually to help me understand what matters most, really, really understand it. And that's just my story. I'm not trying to proselytize or anything like that. But I waited way too long to have a personal mentor. I had career mentors that were ridiculously great.
Should we choose our mentors based off of what matters most to us at the time?
Yes and no. I have to be careful here. Your mentor might be really, really good in a certain part of life and may not be very good in other parts of life. So what I got from my mentors were career advice. I did not get good personal advice because they'd both gone through divorces. They'd both struggled. See, they were career addictions too. And I shouldn't say that they were career addictions, but they were living a life that I sort of admired because I wanted that career feeling. But yeah, I think, yeah, you got to be careful that you want to do everything. You might need different mentors in different areas of life.
I think that's so interesting because when I think about a mentor, a lot of times I do think about a career mentor. Like, oh, okay, you have this job that I wanted. So how did you end up there? Then they tell you stuff. But I love the idea of a personal mentor as well, because I think that's something that more
Yeah,
people definitely need,
I
myself
think so
included.
too. I think so too. Find somebody that has a successful life, whatever that is, not a successful career. See, all the time we think about career mentors. Mm, wish I'd had a personal mentor. Yeah,
So
wish I
then,
did.
how do we distinguish between like having a personal mentor before we hit that like breaking point, right? Like for you, you're saying you have a personal mentor, you wish you had one because of the things you went through, but for somebody right now that might be blindsided, even like me, right? Like I don't know what my future holds, but for somebody that's blindsided right now by the world, how can we prepare before it's too late?
Yeah. Well, I think you start now. I mean, it's never too late. I mean, look at me. I'm pretty far along in my life, but yet I think I've finally figured it out. Thank God I did. I'm so happy that I did. And again, that's why I wrote the book. I wrote the book to have reach to help people. It's for me, it's not about money, but I do want people to read my book and understand, yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff I did, but at what cost? And what can you do? That's why the end of the book is all about having hope. If you care about your career, having hope, because I believe, and I know this sounds like motivational speak, so I can clarify it, but I truly believe that within your God-given talent and within the skills you develop, you can become anything you want. Now, let me clarify that. Shaquille O'Neal, who's 7'2" and over 300 pounds, could not be a jockey in the Kentucky Derby. Genetically, his God-given talent wouldn't allow that. And likewise, a jockey in the Kentucky Derby couldn't be a center in the NBA. So genetically, that's not possible. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, for sure.
But genetically, I mean, as I say, I was never trained to be a speaker. I never had a business class. I never had a tennis lesson. I did okay professionally. So the idea that we need coaches in our life is key.
Jack, my last question to you, and I think I know what you're gonna say. If your book, all the materials you talked about, and all the people that you've positively influenced went out the window and it was erased, what is one message that you would leave with the world?
Ask the question again.
If everything that you had right out on the internet was erased, you didn't have any influence on people, but you had one opportunity to talk to every single person in the world and leave them one thing, what would that be?
We are intended to be social creatures. We are not intended to do life alone. Whatever you do not do life alone.
I love that. Jack, where can people find you at? Shout out your book, shout out anything.
Well, I think if they want to connect with me, it's probably on social media. Probably LinkedIn is where I'm the most active. Um, I'm on Instagram, Jack Groppel one, but just look Jack Groppel on Instagram. My book is anywhere books are sold. Amazon is probably the best. It's called Mountains Within, and it's subtitled "A Life of Achievement: A Quest for Meaning, and the Mountain That Changed Everything." So, the book is bookended around Kilimanjaro, and I tell the whole story. Everything's there. Um, and I hope your readers would enjoy it.
For my listeners, it's going to be in the show notes if you want to check it out. And everybody, thank you for listening. I'll see you next Tuesday.